Hello and welcome to PMI's Leading for Business Excellence podcast. I'm 𝘁𝗵𝗲𝗄, I'm partner and CEO of PMI, the performance improvement, consultancy and training firm. My co-host today is Jan Gillett, founder and former chair at PMI. Jan, first time in the co-host seat. Great to have you with us.
It is, and it's very comfortable, thanks.
This podcast brings you inspiring stories from a multitude of sectors as great leaders shared their experience and insights into how business excellence has enabled them to achieve outstanding results. And never has this been more pertinent than in this, our 40th anniversary year, as we look back at some of the lessons we've learned and forward at what the future holds for business excellence. In this episode, we are delighted to be joined by Marvin Cooke, Executive Vice President Manufacturing at Toyota Motor Europe. Marvin, fantastic to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Rich, Jan. Absolutely delighted to be here, and I have to say it's a great honour. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, Marvin, to get us into the flow, can you give us a brief overview of your career to date? Essentially answering the question, how did you get here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Today, I'm Executive Vice President and take over manufacturing for Toyota in Europe, but of course, it's not always been like that. I started my career at the age of 16 as a young Pirelli tyre company apprentice in Burton-on-Trent. I had 5 years there. I completed my degree during that apprenticeship. And then I moved with Pirelli to Carlisle. I was then an electrical engineer. After a while, I was young, looking for different things. I returned back to the Midlands. I worked in the food and drinks industry for a company called Integrated Engineering Projects, mainly in the brewing industry, which was quite interesting in those days. But I have to be honest, at that time I saw and heard a lot about Toyota making its way into the UK to make its first Toyota fully owned European manufacturing company. And I joined them in 1991, September 1991, again as an engineer. And I never imagined that I would be here still over 32 and a half years later. But it's been an interesting journey and I've had many wonderful opportunities. And I think when a company gives you opportunities to do different things in different places, then why would you want to leave? I've been lucky not only to work in the UK, starting as an engineer, but working through into becoming a manager, a general manager of the operations, all the way through to director level, working in most of the operational departments, but also in areas like corporate planning. I was given the opportunity to work as Director of Production Engineering back in 2011 in Belgium. I returned back to the UK again as a Vice President, and then I had an opportunity to work in the Czech Republic for almost 3 years in our joint venture company as it was then. We now solely own the company. Making again vehicles in the Czech Republic, and returned back to the UK to be the managing director until the end of 2019. And early 2020, I moved out to Brussels, where I am today, as executive vice president, taking care of all of the European manufacturing operations. And of course, that was about 2 months before COVID really hit hold.
Yeah, just about to comment on the timing there.
It's quite an interesting start, but as I say, those things give you opportunity to learn, right?
Yeah, and test your learning, I assume, as well.
Certainly.
Fantastic. So, Marvin, could you give us a feel for the operations that today your role covers, where they are, what products are involved, and kind of volumes and locations? That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly, Rich. So I'm responsible for the European production, 2 locations in the UK, 1 in France, the Czech Republic, 2 in Poland, and also 1 in Turkey. I take care of our supply chain business, which is inbound parts, outbound logistics for vehicles and all of the accessorization of those. Take care of the service and repair parts depots, production engineering also, and the other manufacturing support functions. In all, we have around 20,000 or more direct employees in the manufacturing business unit in Europe. We're producing usually in excess of 800,000 vehicles and powertrains per year. That means we're producing in plants at a rate of 58 seconds a vehicle at the fastest these days.
So a truly systemic organisation, a truly systemic view of it.
Very much so.
And I imagine, given some of the things you've just described, both in terms of the interdependence of those system of processes that you operate, the last few years during this remit, some of those underlying principles, mechanics and processes have been tested as much, if not more, than any point in the past. Is that a fair reflection, do you think?
It's a fair reflection. It's not the first time they've been tested. You know, I believe that you can talk about having great systems and great ways of caring for people, but really they come to be properly tested when times like this happen. You know, of course, I was in Toyota. I was in the UK and also in Belgium when we had the Lehman shock, and that also challenged and questioned a lot of our systems. I was in Belgium when we had the tsunami, which of course gave us supply chain issues. But you know, when COVID came and put to a complete stop the whole business as we knew it, now having to make a complete controlled stop of all of our factories, all of the supply chain, all of the suppliers, with a key priority of taking care of people first and customers, and then, you know, taking care of the business from there. That was a huge challenge. And of course, not long had we got out of those challenges, then we saw the issues with the semiconductor crisis, which was enormous for the automotive industry, the Suez Canal issues. We also were very much in a demand-led market with supply limitations. So really this put quite a stretch on everything. But it is true to say, you know, you can talk about your systems when things are in a good shape and things are running smoothly, but yeah, let's say they're put to the test when the challenges come. And you always learn in these situations. We learned a lot through the Lehman shock, really about, you know, how to, we talk about, you know, taking care of people are the greatest asset, but you prove it when the chips are down. And, you know, when we went to a 4-day working week, and we all took in that circumstance, you know, a 10% pay cut at every level in the company, but we retained the employment of everyone in the business who wanted to stay in the business. Yes, we had some like voluntary retirement schemes, those kind of things, but we retained the greatest asset, which was our people. And, you know, you can say whatever you want to your unions when times are good, but you're tested when the chips are down. And also during the tsunami, you know, in Japan, we really recognized from a global point of view, we were too dependent in some instances for some commodities upon certain suppliers, you know, too narrow a supply chain, and we reflected on that. And that put us in very good shape, you know, when we had the semiconductor crises more recently. And I think we came out of that as well as any automotive OEM.
So if I may, I mean, what is intriguing, having followed Toyota really since the late 80s, one way or another, and one of the things that struck us when we were first building the business was Toyota's open espousal of the things that Dr. Deming was talking about, of the whole system, the processes within the system, the variation in those processes, and the learning from taking every opportunity, and the people, all those things come together in his system of profound knowledge. And what it was always hard to get when you're an outsider like myself or us, is you have a lot of very strong guidelines like single source supplying, because most organizations can't cope with the variation that one source of supplies generates, but having two is just interacts and becomes almost impossible to handle. So you under the real pressures, the crises you've described them, you've had to let go of a great belief. Let's honor the principle of single source supplier. You get all the business, you concentrate on us, and we'll both go together forwards. But there are circumstances where that can't be true, but you still handle them.
Yeah, and I think you have to make the decisions based upon the situations that you're facing. Of course, one thing with our supply chain, we make long-term relationships with the suppliers. And we work hard to ensure that we can understand each other. And I think when you can communicate well and understand each other well, then you're likely to serve each other a lot better. Yeah. And I talk about this truly as a partnership with our suppliers in the supply chain. So, of course, it's like many things. Of course, our business is based upon the Toyota way. I come from manufacturing, so the Toyota way in production is the Toyota production system. And the Toyota production system has very strong guiding principles, and but when we talk about just-in-time production, people sometimes misinterpret that to mean zero stock, right? Nowhere does it say exactly what the number of stock must be. It should be the correct number of parts on hand to keep continuous flow production just in time with the pull system. So I think it's the same with the supply chain. You have to decide based upon what type of commodity, how fragile is that, what are the sort of risks that could occur, and we have to really set up the supply base accordingly. It's no good having one supplier and then having production interruption every week because of being too dogmatic about having one supplier. That would not be be smart. So yeah, we reflected a lot on that, and particularly in the electronic components area, we did realize we're too narrow, and we expanded upon that. And honestly, in some circumstances, we realized that some of those inventory levels were too tight when you consider, and we've seen all of the things that can go wrong in the semiconductor supply chain. Have we had fires? Yes. Have we had floods? Yes. Have we had, it's so cold in Texas that all of the cooling systems froze and cracked the pipes? Yes, we have. Have we had shortage, of course, of workforce? Yes, we have. COVID caused, of course, huge implications in areas like Vietnam, where a lot of the first stage semiconductor wafers are produced. And therefore, you have to set up a supply chain that allows continuous flow production. Otherwise, you just create another waste.
Yeah. And on that subject, Marvin, how easy do you find it to make the case, or even explore the case, for balancing risk and investment and the cost of risk mitigation in things like your supply chain? So some of the conversations, give you an illustration we have with our clients, is lots of tools out there for identifying risks, but then it comes to the crunch of getting to a point of what the business is willing to invest in potential mitigations for a potential risk. How's that in your world, and how do you balance those kind of conversations?
Yeah, a lot of inputs to that. Of course, customer first. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we have a lot of loyal customers. I'm delighted to say in our Toyota and Lexus brands, but customers have choice. But if we're not able to satisfy them in a reasonable time, then they could take alternative choices. But if you stop your operations for any period of time, it is tremendously costly. And the impact of stopping our operation goes far beyond Toyota. We probably have and there are many figures that are bandied about, and I'm sure some of them are right. But let's just pick a number. Let's say there are 7 times the number of people dependent upon Toyota in our supply chain than I have in my factories. And so I think the total cost and impact of that to the customer should help us to make decisions where we can see the risk. And of course, there are many ways to analyze the risk. We don't have to do that solely independently by ourselves. There are many datas out there that we can access from others as well. So I think it's a reasonable process that gets us to that reasonable decision about managing the risk.
And have you any sense of how you compare in those behaviours with your competitors and some of your peers in the industry at all?
I don't think we're totally dissimilar. I think one of the differences, though, the greater difference with Toyota is probably the longer term relationship that we have with our supply chain. Really, we don't like to chop and change. I'm not going to say Toyota is an easy company to work for internally of Toyota or as a supplier. I'm not going to say that, because we do demand a lot of expectations. But at the same time, if part of our supply chain is in trouble, the first question we're going to ask is, how can we help?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that stands us apart probably from other OEMs, but I'm not here to represent or evaluate other OEMs. But I think that would be, from what we hear, that is quite a difference. If one of our suppliers today said, look, we've had a flood in the factory, we're struggling to supply you, the first thing we would offer is support to help them. And that if they're providing parts to 5 other OEMs in Europe, fine, we'll help them get started for all of those 5 other OEMs as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and being conscious of not cutting one's own nose off to spite one's face, I guess.
Yeah, well, it is win-win.
Yeah, indeed. So thinking about the breadth of your operation again, I'm interested, kind of picking up some of Jan's points there. What do you look for, you, Marvin Cooke, look for in your operations? What tells you, gives you the feeling here and the feeling here that things are either in control or otherwise?
Yeah, I think the way people look for excellence in companies varies organization by organization. But I think for me, I've spent the last 32 years in Toyota, so I'm bound to be heavily influenced by that. But I think in Toyota, there's a lot of philosophy about the way we do things. I think there's a lot of technique in how we do things. And I think there's a huge dedication and relentless effort to practice it. And I use the word relentless intentionally because, it is. The most difficult thing for us is continuously maintaining the fundamentals to the highest level. And we discuss and work on that an awful lot of our time. Of course, you've got to manage that, and you've got to manage your breakthrough activities to be prepared and ready and competitive for the future. But therefore, having strong philosophy, really developed technique, and a will to practice means that we focus a lot on the process. And we use the term in Toyota from the Japanese genchi genbutsu. Go to the gemba.
Go and see it.
Go and see and study.
Yes.
Don't just see, and study. And, then if you look more deeply, you're building through that consensus building for action, and you understand firsthand. How many of us hear about something, but when we see the reality, it's quite different? We should never base our actions on a telephone call, really, or something we may have read or heard. The written word can be interpreted in many ways, but when you go to the gemba, when you see the reality in the real time, in the real place, that's the place to make decisions. So for me, even as executive vice president, I don't spend as much time as I used to when I was a shop floor manager or engineer or even production director. But, this week, where are we today? It's Tuesday today. Thursday, I'm going to our operations in northern France. And most of the time we'll be in the workplace speaking to the people who do the job.
And I found that just a sort of a throwback that puts me into is in the late 80s, where as a managing director, I'd been appointed to a head of company of whose business I really had no understanding. And that's very common. There's a big bank here in Britain that's just appointed somebody as chief executive who doesn't seem to have a banking background. So you'd like to think if you've got a background, you can ask the questions. But if you haven't got the background, and I used to get disrupted by going to one of our sites, knowing I didn't know about the business they lived and breathed every day. But also knowing this was when it very fashionable that the directors should go and walk the shop floor. And at a premium, the ones who were recognized as good at this as senior managers were the ones who could remember the names of the families of the employees. That got you lots of. And knowing something about football is really helpful. And it's all displacement. Yes, you are on the shop floor. You're being very frustrated by what you're looking at because it can't be right. But I had no basis for asking the questions. And so that's when I heard about the 𝘁𝗵𝗲𝘆 𝗵𝗵𝗃 and the, if I've got the pronunciation right, and those early Toyota days of watch, don't ask questions, watch, be there for a shift change, watch some more, and ask process-based and variability-based questions.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that fascinating that you're highlighting that kind of approach a whole generation on, so that what we were developing then, or I was being developed in then, is at least as valid now as it ever was then. And sometimes old learning is not really felt to be useful to young people.
No, there's nothing excites me more than being in the Gemba with the people doing their job. You know, that pumps me up. It gives me great passion. And I miss it a lot being in the head office here and in the technical centre in Belgium, but still you'll find me walking around the office floors here just talking to people, you know, because probably think, who is that, you know, but asking the questions and being curious. And I think if you haven't got an interest in people, it's very difficult to lead this kind of business and industry. But I think also I would be a typical kind of Toyota person anywhere around the world, because Toyota generally tries to develop people through the organization. It doesn't mean upon occasion we don't bring people in. That would be wrong to say we don't, but many of us have been generated through many, come through many generations. And I think that keeps a belief and a consistency and not a sudden change of direction. The core principles of Toyota Way have been around a long, long time. The core principles of the Toyota production system have been around a long, long time. Techniques change and systems, we were in a much more digital world than even when I joined the company. They change, but the core values are long with us. And I think that's what takes the company forward. And when Akio Toyoda, who moved into the position of chairman, but he was our global president and CEO for 14 years. He had the ability to have a much more philosophical approach than probably many leaders, with things like make ever better cars. Make ever better cars. That, when first you're thinking, all right, what shall I do with that? But then you can translate that, whoever you are, whatever you do within the company, into your workplace. It doesn't define when you've got there, because let's face it, in Toyota, like many companies, I hope, it's a journey, not a destination. You keep going and going, because there's always something you can do better. We always talk about always a better way, ever better, continuously improving what we do.
Interrupting again,
sure.
What makes Toyota special is that a lot of organizations would speak like you're speaking, but you guys have developed methodologies. If you want to make things better, all your managers are trained in methodologies for doing so, process-based methodologies.
Yes, indeed.
You've got a lot of disciplines about how you measure things, which aren't just financial end results.
No.
And that feels like it's definitively key.
Yeah, I mean, my the top production boss in Toyota Global, Imura-san, comes very much from the Gemba, very much from the production business, and he will always focus on the fundamentals: safety and environment, quality, productivity, and then cost will come. And this has to be process driven. People can look at the results.
No, it doesn't.
But people can celebrate great results, but they may have been by pure luck.
Absolutely.
And you may cry at bad results, and there may be reasons behind that as well. But if we understand the process, and this is where, we have quite strong philosophies in Toyota. What is important, very customer driven, people are most important asset, ever better thinking way, process orientated. So the main indicators that we're interested in are the sub KPIs, the process KPIs. If you just measure the number of accidents, you're not really going to understand what's going on in safety. If you ask people to, for a positive point of view, share their ideas, first of all, of how we can improve the safety, you will learn from that already what kind of situation exists. If you then ask people, whenever there's a concern, we've seen something, there's something on the floor, water or a spillage, fix that, the abnormality. Or the next level, there's been a near miss, something fell off, something and nearly hit me. It's much better to have that level of open and transparent communication with everyone and address the fluctuations and the abnormalities from the ideal before you have a problem. I think very much that's what we work. And of course, nothing is perfect, far from it. And we have a lot of humility, I would hope, in Toyota, where we always focus on the gap. And sometimes that's very tough for people to grasp, particularly coming from the outside into Toyota. We focus very much on the gap. And particularly in manufacturing, probably one of the worst. We don't probably spend enough time sometimes celebrating, and I think we're trying to get better at that. We're trying to learn more from our sales colleagues here, actually. Celebrate the successes, but very much Toyota has been about, okay, yeah, we've done that, what next? We talk about after Kaizen is before Kaizen.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you've finished a Kaizen, an improvement, that's just before you start the next one. So very much that continuous improvement and process orientated, process KPIs. If you're looking at those metrics and have good ones, not too many, otherwise all you do is measure everything.
Yep.
If you have the right ones and if your people understand them and you have very strong two-way communication with the 𝘁𝗵𝗵𝗆𝗄 𝘁𝗵𝗵𝗄 study spirit, then for me that is what would define a business with some operational excellence compared to a business that may get great results and be lucky.
Yeah, and I think what you're doing for me there, Marvin, is describing what is kind of bringing to life your point about philosophy first, and that translates itself into actions, methods, and critically behaviours of your people and your leaders. Is that a fair reflection?
I hope so. Yeah, that's what we try to convey. Again, of course, in any business, results are important at the end of the day. And you need to deliver. Yeah. You need to deliver, but you should be able to make a connection as a leader of the business between what it is in the results that will be delivered from the processes in each part of your business and operation. And I of course, I'm talking a lot today about production and manufacturing, but I talk about in each part of the business. That could be the recruitment process, it could be the finance process, it could be the sales and ordering process. Each of these, if there is good process, if there is an organization that is a learning organization, investing the time to develop people properly and understand continuously that we can do this better, and put in that, and has that will and belief that we can make it better, then I believe the results will come and will follow.
And evidence would suggest that is exactly the case, is it not?
Yeah. But it's relentless, and I use that word earlier on. It is relentless.
Yeah. It is, and what's fascinating is that this picks up on why I was so keen to talk to somebody in your position in Toyota, because I think both that I was privileged to go on a study tour in 1999. So that's now a quarter of a century ago. And we were hosted at the main manufacturing plant by the vice president of, quality communication or something like that, something which had clearly been translated from Japanese to the very words which would have least impact for any top manager of a Western organization. But here was somebody at a very top level talking exactly the same about philosophy. Now, you know that philosophy is a very dangerous word to use in a British or Western company boardroom, as is theory, or as is hypothesis. And so I'm finding it just extraordinary here, 25 years on. You are not parroting what was said 25 years ago. It's slightly different, but it's, gosh, those foundations are still evidently right there.
Yeah,
Wow.
And I think so. I would hope so. And of course, I would hope and imagine if you ask the first generation Japanese sensei, the teachers that came into Europe, and I remember quite vivid Hirano-san, who was the then first president of our company in the UK. He said, I want to take the Japanese principles and I want to take the UK and European culture and make them as one. And I think wherever we operate in the world, there will be an element of the culture locally, naturally in there. But the core principles, theories, as you said, that we're trying to always adopt are very much rooted from what each of us learned in Japan. I spent 9 of my first 11 weeks in Japan. And it was an eye-opening experience. Completely.
Absolutely. Gosh.
So eye-opening. It was so different. And I will be very honest, I probably spent the first 5 years working in Toyota still trying to understand what is going on. Why sometimes is my judgment so bad? I can say that honestly, and I hope I'm better today, but who knows it.
Yeah, and we absolutely shared that puzzlement in the early 90s when we were trying to build our business. We'd read Dr. Deming's words. He had not a practical bone in his body, so though he had nothing about implementation. But gosh, the very ideas and the data that was coming, the reliability and so on that we could see, but trying to actually get to what were these principles and in words we could understand that we could then build into a business, which is what we've spent decades doing.
Yes. But I have sympathy, John, also when you think about other business leaders who've not had that experience or upbringing or opportunity, and you think it whenever, and I've had many opportunities to speak with other business leaders, whether they be CEOs or CFOs or COOs or whatever, and they're always, you can almost write down the questions that you get on the day. So a common one I would receive many times is, you give time to every one of our employees is a member. We're all members of Toyota. So you give time to all of your employees every week to implement Kaizen. Yes, we do. Typically 2 hours to everybody. Okay. How do you calculate the return on investment before you give this time? And the answer is, of course, well, we don't, because we'd never get anything done if we did. Of course, when there are bigger investments, we naturally do the return on investment. But to give people a couple of hours every month to solve the problems that are frustrating to them, or to use their infinite wisdom of the process of work that they do each day, will in return deliver tremendous value and tremendous engagement in the company, is what I believe. But
there's a foundation to that, which I hope that what I'm about to say is something you can agree with. There's only any point in allocating the time to individual employees if you have already trained them in the techniques that they would need to use, and they have used these techniques and have experienced of them working. Because what was happening in Britain so much in the 80s was you hear about quality circles, and people would be given time to do it, but they had no training in the most basic things about understanding processes.
Can I meet you halfway there? Can I meet you halfway there? And the reason I say that is, I went to Japan, I remember in the early 1990s, very early, 1992, maybe 1993 at the latest, to learn how to be a quality circle leader.
Yep.
I was then an engineer, and I was trained, and I had to get my certification, if you like, by delivering on the shop floor in Japan, which I'm pleased to say I did. But the reason I say I meet you halfway is my aim is that everyone, irrespective how long they've been with the company, is involved in QC circles. But the key point is the leaders of the teams in which they're involved need to be trained and understand what they're doing. That's where I meet you, because maybe everybody can use one of the QC tools, right? But most of us would be able to make a chart for something, for example. And it is, I think, the role of the leaders, in the team leaders in our case, who lead the QCC activity. So a team leader probably has typically a team of 5. And some of that team may have been with the company 2 or 3 weeks. It's okay. Engage them. So we look, first of all, for 100% involvement in participation in QCC. Right. But completion rate, not every QC circle makes it to completion. And that's okay for me. If 80% get there or 70% get there, that's still going to be far more beneficial than the 30. If you ask me, are 100% of my ideas put perfectly into execution? I don't think so. Taiichi Ohno, one of the
that's a good job
fathers of the system, said something like 50% of all of the decisions we make will be good ones, right? I'm not sure. Who knows? I don't know. But the point is, the reason I'm here halfway, I think QC Circle is a wonderful way of getting people involved in solving problems that frustrate them every day. And when we start the QC Circle journey, and typically a QCC activity for us would last 6 months, a round of QCC. So typically each of our employees is exposed to 2 every year. Our aim is to ensure everybody does 1 every year at least, but typically 2 cycles. And if you think about that, the first question we're asking them is, what is it you want to solve? Now, as leaders, we may throw some balls of particular themes or topics that we want to see improvement in, but we ask them, what is their concern? What is the problem that is worrying them the most, or the abnormality which is worrying them the most? And we start there. Because if that's solved, that will help develop that team. So again, the reason, Jan, I say I meet you halfway is because being involved in QCC is how you learn about QCC. You don't have to do it in a classroom. Doing it in the workplace, whether that be in the office or in the shop floor, working with others who have probably more experience in QC Circle will allow you to learn. And I think being given that opportunity, that experience generates tremendous engagement also. And we give the opportunity still today for the winning teams from each of the affiliate companies, like our plants in the UK or France or Poland, Czech Republic, Turkey, everywhere. We give them the opportunity to go to Japan and present on the global stage.
Oh, fantastic.
So you can imagine team members from our factory in Turkey or the Czech Republic or France, UK, Poland, or from the parts centre here in Diest. That's memorable, right?
Yeah, I bet. So you just spurred a thought there as you talked about that, because I was preparing to ask you about capturing and sharing the learning that goes into those exercises to avoid duplication, etc. You've just described part of it. How is that captured in a routine way that, if a team somewhere that's got an overlapping problem with a team in a completely different product area, but it's essentially a similar problem, how do you share that improvement and learning that they've gone through in those potentially twice-a-year exercises?
Yeah, I think in Quality Circle you've got to accept there's going to be a bit of duplication across companies, to be quite honest. But we have a word that we use freely in Toyota in Europe called 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝗴𝘀. It's from the Japanese, and we haven't yet worked out a good way of saying it in short, because for us, 𝘁𝗀𝗀𝗃 is to share laterally from business to business a great idea or improvement. And one of the things I'm always looking for in business as well, which links a little bit, Rich, to something you asked earlier, is for me, it's not only about the business who has great process, great results, and great ideas, but I'm also looking at who is sharing what, because we're stronger together as a business. You know, we're not competing against each other. We should be very much sharing with each other. But there is a natural human nature to say, oh, you know, best.
Absolutely.
So 𝘁𝗀𝗀𝗃 is a real key principle. So we do share the 𝘁𝗵𝗶 activities. So they present, particularly the winning ones, present to each other across Europe, and then we try and cascade that back into the organization for others to see. But that is not a perfect process. But also we have what we call shop by shop activity. A shop in Toyota language would mean like the paint shop or the assembly shop or whatever, the casting shop. And we have leaders, and these are not necessarily the top management level, but we have representatives of each of those shops from every one of the companies meet together probably only 4 times a year. But they can connect though with a Teams call or whatever at any time, but physically together, and they will go and see. But what we do in those areas before they embark on the annual activity in our 𝘁𝗵𝗵𝗆, our annual objective setting, the shop by shop leaders will get together and decide what are the issues we are going to work on this year and who will lead each of those issues. And this will, of course, go up the pyramid and align, hopefully, with what I'm also looking for as EVP, because we have our individual activities. And these become our PDCA or PDSA activities, as you would call, throughout the organization. And this means, therefore, you will have, for example, there may be, let's say, quality assurance. We're probably looking at adopting some artificial intelligence to simplify what is very difficult and laborious work where people are having to use their eyes to look out for problems on the surface of the vehicle or something like that, whatever, or the assembly of the vehicle. And we may say, okay, we're going to assign that to the shop by shop team, QC's team. Turkey, you take that one.
Okay.
And then the UK plant will take another, and they'll collaborate and cross-fertilize their skills and knowledge. So 𝘁𝗀𝗀𝗃 is a great weapon to share, and also a great frustration because I can never do enough of it. There's always a gap somewhere, and I'm lucky because people always show to me the best of the best whenever I visit our plants.
Of course,
it's natural. And sometimes I've seen this 2 times now, you know. But that's life, and we have to.
I think you might be thinking this is going without saying that this activity is not just manufacturing.
Oh, no.
But I think for our viewers, it may be worth emphasizing that this goes across service areas and so on and so on.
We have HR shop by shop activity, and finance do the same, for example. Because you think about human resources, or as we call here now, people and innovation, as we call it in Belgium, which I think is understandable. But if you look at the kind of breakthroughs we're trying to make, diversity, equity, inclusion, you know, we can learn so much from each other. We can compound our efforts and amplify our knowledge by working together. If we look at development of people or organization of the future, you know, what kind of organization will we need in our company in 15 years' time in a different world, you know, a connected or autonomous, shared, electrified world? Aren't we better to try and work that out together? I think so. So yes, we have these shop by shop activities for our corporate and office areas.
It's fascinating, and I've written down a quote here. I'm going to quote you to several of our clients. So being comfortable with some level of duplication, is fascinating, because the number of conversations that I have with customers when we're designing these processes, some similar to those that you're describing, is a requirement. There mustn't be any duplication. We can't have any overlap in these things. And the trouble with that, of course, and you've described it perfectly, is you spend your time policing it instead of actually allowing your people to work on the innovation and the improvement.
No, this is very true, Rich. And at the moment, of course, I often become a bit frustrated, particularly with the digital transformation, because it's so democratized now and it's so accessible and reasonably priced. But of course, naturally, everyone wants to adopt and use it.
Yeah.
And we're putting in platforms, of course, to ensure we keep cybersecurity and we give longevity to these solutions. But as much as I may get a bit frustrated about it on occasion, there is an inevitability that 2 or 3 or 4 people in different affiliates are going to come up with a similar idea and they're going to want to try it. And the phrase I'm always using is, how do I keep innovation and speed and standardization? So I don't want to stifle innovation by trying to commonize or prevent duplication. And I think that's what allows me to sleep at night. How to have a high degree of standardization without stifling innovation in a sentence. It's a challenge, but it's something as leaders we've got to accept.
Fantastic. So somehow we're entering into the final phase of our conversation. I don't know how we've managed to get here. I always say the sign of a successful interview is where I've had to ask very few questions, and yet we've covered all the topics that I was hoping to touch on, and I can't tell you how many more. It's been fantastic, Marvin. So can I just turn the questions a little more towards you personally and your personal experience? So if I were to ask what key advice you would give yourself earlier in your career, what would cross your mind?
Oh, that's always a tough question. I think classically we're always going to say, be the best version of yourself and deliver the best deliverers you can as an individual. But when I look back now, of course, maybe when I was younger, I wanted to be the best engineer. But truthfully, I think understanding and getting along with people might get you further than being the best engineer. So be good, be good in your discipline, but also learn about people and relationships and how to work with them, because finally, naturally, that's what we have to do. And you talked earlier, Jana, about leaders and getting to know the people in your workplace. You've got to have an interest in people. I think one thing I would definitely say is, please remember that success is not final and failure is not fatal. By that, I mean, you're going to make some mistakes. The trick is not to repeat them, but you learn from mistakes. I've made so many mistakes.
And we're back to the cycle, aren't we?
We're back to the cycle. And as a leader, please allow your people to try.
Yeah.
Because I think and going back to, some of the sympathies to companies who've never had this kind of experience. One of the difficult things of being a leader is letting go of some of that control, right? You have to allow other people to try and decide things on your behalf. Because if you don't, then you're not going to get the infinite wisdom from the people and the benefit of that. Those people are doing the work every day. So learn from your mistakes, but you're going to make some. So that's the same. Never stop being a student. I've been applying the Toyota production system for over 32 years, and I'm still a novice, I'm sure. So lifelong learning.
And you just look at Einstein's theories of all sorts of things about space-time and so on. They're absolutely still being explored as we speak, multiple ways, but they're not being disproved. They're not useless because they're old.
Indeed.
They're a foundation for continual learning. And this is what I wish I could get across to people who think of business and management, is because they're all the time looking for something new. And you get it to the extent where things from centuries ago get repackaged. The classic one is, when does something happen? When does it not happen?
Yeah.
Which I think there's a certain consultancy built a worldwide business on, calling it their method. It was Francis Bacon in 1616 the first that wrote that down.
Goodness me. No, and I'll give you two more. You asked the question, Rich. I think love what you do, because if your heart's not in it, you're never going to give it 100%. And last one, of course, in leaders, there are many times when we've got to be tough, but don't forget to be kind. Yeah, I would. They're my thoughts anyway.
No, fantastic. So, jumping right back, there's a point I wanted to pick up on in your intro, and you're giving us the overview of your career, Marvin. You talked about your apprenticeship in Pirelli, and then the development after that, and your first 5 years learning in Toyota, and the subsequent years included. What is your personal view on the structure and availability of options for development paths like the one you've had? Less about Toyota, but more in the companies that you interact in the industry in general. Do you think that's as strong as it used to be? Do you think it's stronger? What's your personal perspective on that?
Okay, just to clarify the question, if I may, Rich, you mean coming in with an engineering discipline and going through more management way?
I think so. I'm interested in the so the apprenticeship world has taken on a different take. The young apprenticeship schemes aren't as prevalent as they previously have been in some cases. In some cases, they're absolutely superb, but it's no longer the standard. And we have quite a lot of conversations with people that have come in different ways. And I'm wondering whether, come through the ranks in different ways. And I'm wondering whether you think what the robustness is like, what the health of that young skills development area is like, I guess.
I'm a great believer and hope ambassador of apprenticeships. It's what got me into my career, and I still think, vocational learning. And as we talk about, I'm sorry, you said not to talk about Toyota, but on-the-job learning is tremendously valuable and delivers wonderful skill sets. Are we doing enough? I think no, not yet. But I think there are also a broader range of apprenticeships today when we look at the higher level, when you get to level 5 and above. So I think there's still a great way to get into a career, and I would recommend anyone to do that. In the UK, I think we still have more and more opportunity, and there still seems to be, in some corners, some question about is apprenticeship the same as a more academic route? Well, going back to that comment about understanding people and how to work with people, you're going to get that in bucket loads being an apprentice. I remember when I was...
Like it or not.
Like it or not, it's going to come your way. But if you don't get it then, it's coming to you later in life anyway.
Like it or not.
Why not? Why not?
Yes.
And I think that certainly helped shape and mold me and what I believe in today. So I think looking in our industry, we have a lot of work to do still to develop STEM. I think there are so many tremendous opportunities for the STEM subjects, and certainly in our business, not only in places like the UK, but here in Brussels, in Belgium, we try and work with a lot of schools, a lot of partner skills to engage people at an early age. And I look at it like this, I'm not an academic, so I'm not the best person to determine how we should teach young people. But what I can offer from my business is the opportunity for young people to be exposed at an early age to the opportunities that exist in businesses like ours, which are very broad and also very exciting. And that's something I think we as business leaders have a huge responsibility to do.
Brilliant. So taking us to our very final question.
Oh, goodness.
Thinking about other leaders you admire throughout the course of your career, maybe those you've come into contact with, maybe those you haven't. Who are they and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when we look to other leaders, I think there are particular elements that we can take and that take them off the scale in a particular way. I suppose if I look internally in the Toyota business, first of all, I'm going to name two. One of them I certainly never met, which is Kiichiro Toyoda, because without him, I wouldn't be here today, because he took Toyota from being a loom business to an automotive business. And I think that takes tremendous vision and courage. And I'm sure most people were telling him, no, don't do that. You know, he sold the patents to the automatic loom to the Platt brothers in the UK, which afforded the original investment in Toyota Motor Corporation that we now see today as what it is. So I think, you know, from a visionary and the courageous point of view, certainly a person who shaped, I would say, a lot of us in Toyota was the late Sir Alan Jones. He was the first production director in the UK. And, you know, for me, what makes a good leader, I think one of the first things is when they say thank you. I have a particular anecdote. I remember when I was a young engineer, part of my responsibility of the plant had been broken down all night. I got called out of bed in the early hours. I worked through the night, and as a young engineer, I was able to put it right. I went home, got a few hours sleep, arrived late in the morning, and Sir Alan walked across the office. I thought, oh, I might be in trouble here. He came to me and gave me one of his big slaps on the back and said, thank you very much. You know, thank you very much for what you do. And, you know, that was the first thing, and that makes your day somewhat different, if I may say. So, you know, I think a lot of us could learn a lot.
So. That's been fantastic. Yeah, quite the collection. No, brilliant. Thank you for that. That is great. Okay, so thanks, Marvin. It has been outstanding, and the insights you've generously shared, our audience will be most grateful for. So thanks so much for your time today. We recognise it's a very valuable time, and we greatly appreciate it, as will our listeners.
Rich, Jen, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's
that's okay. And enjoy the Olympics.
Always an honour to be engaged in something like this. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to PMI's Leading for Business Excellence podcast today. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as Jan and I have recording it. This episode with Marvin Cooke, Executive Vice President of Manufacturing at Toyota Motor Europe, is one of the most memorable for me. Particularly Marvin's focus on the long term, as he explored through our conversation the journey that he's been on through his career, but how he ensures excellence in his operations across Europe to produce the superb product that Toyota is known for today. We heard from Marvin about the importance of putting people first, but at the same time putting customer first, and how Toyota balances those two things. Also, there was the theme of philosophy, and how philosophy is translated into practical action in the day-to-day. I don't know about you, Jan, but I also took away the importance of going to see and going to study. All too often it's just one or the other, isn't it? And very much impressed upon me doing both of those. I also really enjoyed Marvin describe his sense of curiosity, even after 32 years in the business, coupled with the humility that's expressed in the Toyota corporate culture. And Marvin himself. As I say, we really enjoyed recording it, and I hope you enjoy listening to it.